Hello, everyone. I'm pre-recording outside because I sprayed some uh, anti-mosquito in the house because I was already bitten, not just one, but two or three, or even four or five mosquitoes already. So I decided I might as well just go on and pre-record this one in accordance and I'd like to start again from the very beginning as we move forward to the 40 that we have mentioned. And I'd like to take it in terms of the introduction 17A to 18A, and then cut it there for a shorter recording. And then I'll look at it again in terms of 18A to 19B. But for now, 17A to 18A, no? Um, let's look at that. No, so the as I was saying, the first words of the first sentence of the apology is very important, and here it begins with the Greek words ok oida, or I do not know. No, I don't know. This is the hidden key, as we said, to the central meaning of the dialogue. Uh, it's not actually a dialogue. The apology, it's really a monologue. And it contains a little dialogue in which Socrates is allowed to cross-examine Meletos, but most of the time, the apology is really understood as a monologue. So, as I said also, Plato usually gives the readers clue to help him and hides it to test him. For example, the first words of the Politeia says, I went down to the Piraeus, which actually signals Plato's descent in the cave in Book 7. Or the words of Meno, which we will see, or which you will see because that's a totally reading module. Can you tell me, Socrates, which signals the point of the dialogue of the Socratic method of teaching and questioning, the elenchus? Or even the first words of the Phaedo, a text which we will not read, where it says, were you there with Socrates, as if we want to be identified or to identify with Socrates' life and death, because Socrates dies in the Phaedo, and is somewhat similar to the Christian song, were you there when they crucified my Lord, were you there? The first words of the Euthyphro, this Socrates is something new, also signals the fact that Socrates represents a fundamentally new approach to piety than the old one, which is represented by Euthyphro. So the most unforgettable section of the Apology for nearly all readers and for the subsequent history of philosophy is actually the account of the delphic messenger, the pronouncement, which was relayed by Socrates' friend Chaerephon, that no one in the world was wiser than Socrates, and that Socrates' response, devoting his life to unraveling this riddle, by trying to find or look for someone wiser than himself, led him to the development of the Socratic elenchus, or Socratic method of cross-examination. His solution, of course, to the delphic messenger was that though he has no wisdom at all, because it seemed like he recognized that only God has wisdom, he says man can actually pursue it. This is wisdom, to know that he does not know, and the world must learn it if it wants to be wise. This is an indispensable lesson. Uh, Blaise Pascal, said, there are only two kinds of people in the world: saints who know they are sinners, and sinners who sinners who think they are saints. Of course, he learned this wisdom from Jesus, who also might have thought about Socrates' discovery. We don't know really. For Socrates would also say that there are only two kinds of people the wise who know they are fools, and the fools who think they are wise. In philosophy, as in religion, this is something we have to pay attention to. So Socrates begins his defense of himself as as one who is in pursuit of wisdom and of philosophy itself, no? Like a Zen master whose first lesson to the student who's eager to learn his wisdom is simply to pour into the student's cup until it overflows and overflows more. Uh, to which the student would say, Master, stop pouring, the cup is already full. And the master would say, like your mind, how can I fill your cup if it's not empty? Uh, I do not know. I don't know. That's a very interesting line to begin with. The second thing is that I was the thought that he was almost carried away by the accusations uh, of his interlocutors, that he was not even able to recognize himself. No, know thyself. That's what you can find at the door of the at that door, no, of the at the door portals of the or at the temple of Apollo. You can be knowledgeable, of course, without knowing yourself, but you cannot be wise without knowing yourself. No? And here you see again the distinction between episteme and Sophia, no? Kaalaman at karunungan, no? For if you do not know yourself, if you are a stranger to yourself, if you have never wondered about the knower, only about the known, then no matter how much knowledge you have, you do not know who has it. You will never recognize who is wise. And that's what you will see here, no? You will never know. Know thyself, as I said, was inscribed in the portals of the delphic Apollo's messenger's temple, and it was one of the first commandments of the god Apollo, who supposedly inspired the Sibyl, Sibyl. This is the prophetess, the messenger who spoke in the god's name. The second rule was nothing in excess. These two commandments actually sum up the wisdom of Apollo. As we shall soon see, Socrates took these commandments more seriously than any other Athenian did. And it was supremely ironic that he was the only Athenian ever executed for religious crime. Socrates' predecessors had wondered about many things, the elements, the heavenly bodies, the mysteries of nature, the gods, numbers. But Socrates philosophized only about human life and its moral problems, virtues and vices, wisdom and follies, rights and wrong. Perhaps that was the reason he knew very well, nothing is harder to know than the self. No questions resist certainty and closure more than moral questions, because nothing is deeper and closer to us. I remember one time Eddie Boy saw me in the refectory. You know, Eddie Boy Calazans is one of our retired faculty, and I was eating chocolate, and he asked me, anong lasa? How does it taste? And it was a dark chocolate, so I told him mapait. And then he said, like a bitter gourd, parang ampalaya. And I said, hindi, matamis na mapait. And then he said, ampalayang may asukal, no? And then his insight came when he says, mahirap ipaliwanag, di ba? Kasi malapit masyado. Ganun din kapag malapit masyado, no? Just like knowing oneself. Try to measure the earth and you may succeed, no? As one of the ancient Greek Eratosthenes actually did. And you may think you are wise, but try to measure yourself and your life's meaning and things like truth and justice and beauty, and you will find that you are in fact swimming in waters far over your head. Deeper even, no? Deeper even, I have to move a little bit because I'm now inhaling the fumes of the insecticide. Hindi naman ako lamok na mamamatay ako agad, but I might absorb it, and that's another issue altogether. Life's meaning, things like truth, justice, goodness, beauty, those are much difficult, di ba? We saw that already in Euthyphro. The gods don't even worry about things that are calculable, but precisely about things that are not. You know? The world in your head is much bigger than the world outside your head. Perhaps know thyself is not just difficult, but also impossible. Perhaps it's a koan, as Zen Buddhists would call it, an unsolvable puzzle that nevertheless teaches you and transforms your thought radically by its very unsolvability, such as what is the sound of one hand clapping, or how do you teach a blind man since birth the color green? For there always remain an I behind the me, a knower behind the known, a subject behind the object, like the projecting machine behind the movie. How could what is not an object, but the knowing subject, ever become an object of knowledge? I frankly doubt whether this is what Socrates meant by emphasizing know thyself, or that he doesn't know himself. It seems too modern, too subjective, too psychological. The ancients were like precocious children, endlessly asking, "What's that?" in a more objective way. And Socrates probably meant by know thyself, not objectify the subject or define the indefinable, unique individual you, but simply to know what it is to be a human being. Tuklasin kung ano yung akma sa tao, no? Paano maging tao, how to be a human being. Know the difference between men and beasts, between men and gods, between good and evil. This is precious. This is precious wisdom, I'd say. And we nearly forgotten it, nor so did these accusers. Their picture of Socrates, as you can find here, is that he's a dangerous, clever speaker. In short, that he's simply evil, that he's simply corrupt, corrupting, dishonest, sophistic, impious, atheistic. But is he? No. And he says here very clearly that their arguments for this false picture were so clever that they almost rob him of his own self. No more precious property can take. And that's also something we need to pay attention to. That's why he would say, I was almost carried away. They spoke so persuasively. I almost forgot myself. No? And he would simply say, they speak so well. I'd agree that I am an orator here. I agree that I am an orator, but he would say, I'm not an orator of that sort. This, of course, is ironic, no? Ironia. Ironic is the contrast between appearance, and irony is the contrast between appearance and reality, between what seems, the world of the seeming, versus reality, between what seems and what is, or between what we expect and what we discover. ancient Greek drama is full of irony, especially Sophocles. The Greeks became the world's greatest philosophers, partly because they were ironic. They learned to question appearances, to find something more, deeper, some hidden reality behind the appearances. Come to think of it, animals are not able to do that. They live in the appearances alone. No? Philosophy, as the love of wisdom, carries within it the ability to see beyond appearances. And irony is this contrast. That's why you'd see why philosophy is naturally ironic. And as I said, irony is a very negative term in the ancient Greeks, but it will take a new form here. Something to consider also. The ironic contrast, the irony contrast Socrates referred to in his here in I Don't Know is the contrast between who he really is and who his accusers say he is, and try to persuade the jury he is, and nearly persuade Socrates himself that he is. No? And that's quite interesting how Socrates himself nearly almost saw that. So he says with sarcastic, ironic exaggeration, who he really uh, is interesting. But his accusers are persuading the jury that he is otherwise, a corrupter of the young. He is also, in truth, one of the most pious minds in Athens. But of course, they will persuade their jury otherwise. In fact, he would say, uh, uh, rather, just as I claimed, they have said little or nothing, whereas from me, you will hear the entire truth. Here, the contrast Socrates points to is between objective truth and subjective belief or opinion. Truth cannot be destroyed, but it can be hidden by our own foolish prejudices or dark desires. And persuasion can lead minds to falsehood as well as truth. So Socrates' accusers love success in persuasion. Socrates loves truth. Uh, he is fanatically, absolutely, single-mindedly devoted to truth. You might even say that truth is Socrates' God, but he would certainly understand Gandhi's saying, God is not in strength, but in truth. And therefore he asks his judges, the jurors, to be similarly single-minded. That's why he will say here that like him, they should actually imitate him. There. So now I'm asking you justly, it seems to me, to overlook my manner of speaking Maybe it will be better, but consider and apply yourself to these alone. To these alone. Whether I say what is just or not. One is reminded at this point of Jesus's single-minded advice to Martha when he says, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. One thing is necessary. The one thing Socrates asks them to consider is justice, is truth, truth about right and wrong. Whether it's just or not. Yeah. When the guardians of justice judge the just, or the just Socrates to be unjust, we have a supreme irony, a most striking contrast between appearance and reality, and further irony. What is on trial here is in fact the way of life proposed by philosophy, the love of truth even. Darkness, therefore, seems to be judging light here. And he continues that here in 17c. When he says, there, instead what you will hear will be spoken extemporaneously. So we can get, but not by Zeus, men of Athens, expressed in that. So we can read even sentences earlier. Rather, just as I claimed, they have said little or nothing true, but whereas from me you'll hear the whole truth, but not by Zeus, men of Athens, expressed in elegant language like theirs, arranged in fine words and phrases. Instead, what you will hear will be extemporaneously in whatever words come to mind, and let none of you expect me to do otherwise, for I put my trust in the justice of what I say. The weapons of Socrates' enemies are not truths, but tricks, rhetorical tricks. What is rhetoric? Rhetoric is the art of persuasion by words. When you use highfalutin language, in ancient Athens, which did not have modern media technology, rhetoric was a tremendously powerful tool, for it was a power over other people, not just nature, and over their minds, not just their bodies. Since it is powerful, it is dangerous, but it is not intrinsically evil. If it serves truth, it is good. If it serves falsehood, it is evil. There are honest ways to persuade people and also dishonest ways. From the Middle Ages until the latter half of the 20th century, most liberal art schools taught courses in rhetoric. Many required it. It was deemed not only useful but honorable. But the word rhetoric today usually connotes the misuse rather than the use of persuasion, and this was beginning to be so in Socrates' day too. Thus, Socrates contrasts it to philosophy. Instead of rhetoric, Socrates uses simple, plain speech, ordinary language, because this is clearer and clarity is the servant of truth. Rhetoric has not disappeared today, nor has it weakened. It has just changed in forms. In the past, its form was mainly oratoric, speech making, either political, religious, or legal. Today, its most powerful tools are not just words, but memes, images, images that you can find in TV, movies, even in the internet. In the image media, words are subordinate to images. When words are used, they are suggestive sound bites that call up images. In modern communications, this is vastly preferred to argument. Can you recall the last logical argument you actually heard from TikTok, YouTube, or even advertisements? Advertising has spread its technique everywhere. Products are sold by suggestion, not reason. Advertising is technically the oldest profession. It began in the Garden of Eden. Remember that apple? See that apple? Eat that apple. Be like God. Of course, it's not an apple, no, I'm aware. But proof of the power of rhetoric today is very simple. Rhetoric controls money. Money controls power. If you want to find that invisible thing, power, find the visible money trail. And one of the surest and quickest way to get rich is to learn to lie to people about how much they need what you're trying to sell in part. Socrates is such a terrible salesman because he cannot sell the truth about himself and save his own life. He's not clever. His speech is not covered with ornaments. He simply speaks the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. For a much more profound investigation of rhetorics versus the truth of philosophy, it's interesting to read Plato's Gorgias. It is significant that Socrates here is an old man, 70 even, they say. And that's approach has a powerful power to clarify and simplify things. Rhetoric loses its power in the face of death. Death is the friend of truth. Dr. Johnson says that he knows of no thought that so wonderfully clarifies a man's mind as the thought that tomorrow morning he will be hanged, or even that he would die. That's for the introduction part, which is the first way of clarifying Socrates, especially his attempt to, in the Apology. In the next recordings, we will look at the statement. Thank you for your attention.